Welcome back, everyone. All right, we've got an artboard full of content. We want to be able to export some of this and take a look at it as different parts. So let's talk about exporting content. Now, from where we had left off last time, we have 6 layers set up with all kinds of different imagery. Let's go ahead and start off with narrowing it down to 1. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the eyeball here and hide all but just the 1 layer. All right, so I have my bottom layer, and I'm going to select it, and I'm going to unlock it. Okay, so now I've got my objects. Now let's talk about having objects and selecting whether or not. So I'm going to move some of these objects and move some of them. They'll be on screen and others will be off screen. I notice some of those I've gone ahead and I've moved them on or off, changed the size and scale, etc. So here we go. I've gone ahead and changed some things around. Now I've done this basically, and I wanted a few objects to be sitting off the screen because I wanted to show you that we can crop these objects when we export. So I'm going to go to Command minus right now to go ahead and zoom out a little bit, and use my space bar and left click to go ahead and adjust that around. Now I'm looking at everything that I can see here. Now, here's what I want you to do. To export what's here, basically I can export 1 layer at a time, or I can export as many layers as I want to, okay? But it'll all be compressed into 1 layer. So here's what's going to happen. If I go to File in the upper left-hand side, and we say Export, and I'll say Export as, this is crucial. Now I can change it. Now in the drop-down menu right here, it has all these different settings. What we're going to be using mostly for class is we'll be using either the JPEG or the PNG file formats. Typically we'll use PNG more than anything else. Reason being is because a PNG is a slightly larger file than a JPEG, but a PNG also allows you to have a transparent background, and a JPEG does not. So let's go ahead and select PNG. And I can go ahead and title it. So I can say shapes. Shapes 1 there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm not going to use where it says use artboard. I'm going to ignore that because I want to show you what's going to happen. If I don't click that, it means it's going to export everything that we see here. Take a look. We'll go ahead and say, and I'm going to pick my location where I want it to go. We'll say desktop, and I've got a folder set up for demos. And I'm going to say export. Now the second window that pops up here, you'll notice we get this resolution, and this is the quality. If you want something to have a higher quality, you'll see it says high, 300 ppi, medium, or screen level. Basically what the idea is that if you're going high quality, that means it's something that's ready for print, okay? If it's something that's just for standard, for content delivery on the web, 72 is fine. But for right now, I'm going to go ahead and keep it at 300. And down below here, colors, we'll keep that just the way it is, the presets, but the background color is interesting. Notice when I check on this, I can go transparent, white, or black. So here's my transparent, here's my black, and back to white. I'm going to say, let's go ahead and edit this as transparent background. Now I'm going to say OK. Give it a second. Boom, it just popped up here in my demo folder. Let's open up the demo folder, and there it is. So now if I open this up, we can see there's the image. But you notice it shows everything around there. We see all of the shape here. Everything is being shown. I'm going to go ahead and close this up. And let's go back in now, and I'm going to export this again. But this time I'm going to use artboard. So let's go ahead and say export, export as. And it's still set for PNG. It's still set for shapes. We're going to change that to shape number 2. And this I'm going to say use artboard and say export. And now it's still set for transparent. We'll keep it all the same there. So I have it set for transparent, and I'm going to go ahead and say OK. Now we'll go back up to the demo folder, open it up, and you'll notice quite clearly, you can see even without opening up, object number 1, you'll notice that all my shapes are intact. But on number 2, that the edges of the objects, or any of the object where it was going off of the artboard, is now gone, right? It was cropped on there. So that is a big, big thing there. So that is an image that is cropped. So that's really what I want you to know about there. So let's go ahead and close this up here. And let's go ahead and go into our next setting here. So I have that exported. Let's go ahead and try this one. Now I've got this exported. I'm going to move my objects into the center of my stage, right? I've got this all in the center of the stage here. Maybe I'll change the colors here a little bit more for you here and go something a little bit different. There we go. We can see that. Now I'm going to go ahead and add a second layer on top just to show you. Say I bring in those good old lens flares, and I'll show that. So there's those lens flares. Some of them, and they're on the top layer, right? Or I can drag and put them on the bottom layer so they're underneath, but let's put them on top because then we see some of those layers sort of shining through on here. Now I'm going to go ahead and export this. But when I export it, let me lock this layer too, but show them both. I'm going to export this, and you'll see what happens. I'm going to go File, Export, Export As. And again, I'm going to go ahead and keep it as a PNG, but I'm going to go shapes number 3 this time, so I can change that. Number 3, and I'm going to say, well, I'm not going to use artboard. We won't use artboard. Export, but make sure my background is transparent. And we'll say OK. Then I go back in here, open up my demo folder, and there it is. And you can see, I can see everything on that object. I can see the objects that were on the bottom layer and on the top layer. But all the stuff in the middle, we don't see it. So again, you can export, and you can change the order, and you can decide what to select and what not to show on an object. Okay. Now, I'm going to go ahead and close this one up, and I'm going to go ahead and re-export this again one more time. But this time when I do it, I'm going to have a white background on there. So let's go ahead and go to File, Export, Export As, and I'm going to go ahead and use Artboard Shapes 3. I'm going to make it Shapes 4 now. And I'm going to say that we won't use Artboard, but again, we're going to put a color on there. We're going to put a white background on there. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and say OK. Give it a second, and it's going to pop up in there. And there we go, Shapes 4. Now 1 has basically nothing going on behind it, and the other one has the white background. But how do we know? What are we going to be able to do to find it out? What's the difference for us? Well, let's go show you. If I go back into here, let me go ahead and close this up. If I go back to here, and I'm going to lock this layer and lock this layer, we're going to do a little experiment. If I use the Create New Layer tool, and I'm going to go ahead and open up my demo folder, I can go ahead and click and drag those objects into this folder. I can go ahead and move those in here. Okay, so I've got that opened here. Let me go ahead and actually want to make me do it. File import, file, and we'll go ahead and place. Now, when you put something and bring something into Adobe Illustrator, it's not import. It's place. And so to help you remember it, think of it as I've got something that I want to put in its place. So we're going to put something in its place here by selecting place, and then I can go ahead and select the object. So let's select object number 3, and I'm going to go ahead and place it in there, and then click, and there it is. And you'll notice here now, if I move this off to the corner here, you'll notice that there's no background on there. Yeah, make a Command minus, shrink out, and then I can go ahead and I can hold the Shift key to lock the proportion like we did in the shapes, and there it is. I was showing it to you, right? Look at that. I've basically got half of it in, half of it out, and look at that. You don't see any background. So that's the advantage of exporting it with a transparent background. Now let's go ahead and import something on this layer, but we're going to go ahead and import File, and we're going to place again. This time we're going to take number 4. Remember that had the white background. So click, and there it is. So look at that. So we've got now, I'm going to shrink it down here with a Shift key. You notice that one object. So I move it off to the side here so you can see that difference between the two. That one has a transparent background, so I can import it into something and get a lot of use out of it because I don't have to worry about that background. Whereas this one, well, I exported it with a white background, so I'm kind of stuck with it now, right, on this image. So you can make your life easier, and oftentimes I recommend, unless you're doing something specific, always export your objects with a transparent background, unless you're trying to make a particular scene, or if you're trying to make something just isolated, though, transparent's best. That way you've got unlimited usability, so you can rescale it, copy and paste it, and use that image over and over and over without having to work with or worry about any backgrounds. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and lock this layer and go ahead and hide that, and there we are. There concludes our little look and talk at how to import and how to export a file, and what kind of file to go ahead and import and export with. Okay, so go ahead and try this yourself now. Use that page and go ahead and export and put that stuff out there, and we'll go ahead and we'll see you back for our next project.